Sleeve Island is a place where every sweater eventually winds up. It is after the interesting part is done, the yoke and the shaping are finished, and all that's left is rows and rows and rows and rows of plain old stockinette. Sometimes it's a very slow process. Sometimes these projects never leave Sleeve Island. They get put down in project bags or baskets and never picked up again. But there's an easy way to escape from Sleeve Island, and I will show you how. But first we have to get there. I will admit I am not a hand knitter. Though I have done some hand knitting in the past. I have never knit a top-down round yoke sweater before, though I have made several on my machine. And there's a link to one here. I originally intended to find a pattern for a round yoke sweater and work with that, but I looked at, I think, one, and I realized how much I hate following other people's patterns. I need a full understanding of how a sweater is going to work. I just can't get that from the average pattern looking at, like, cast on this many stitches, increase here, decrease there. That's not the way that I think about projects. That's not the way that I understand knits. So, I'm winging it. I am making this up as I go, based on what I know about how knits behave and how I believe a top-down round yoke sweater should be knit. So we're going to see how this goes. I did make a prototype though. Let me show you that so I know if it's going to work. This is my prototype. It is 1/3 scale. I learned how to do color work for this. Color work by hand, that is. And short rows. So I'm pretty proud of this, even though it is pretty wonky. I believe that my next attempt will be a little more smooth, but I know this works because it worked on a small scale, so that should extrapolate up to the large scale. I am working with colorwork charts from the Autumn Doodle Cow from Pacific Knit Co. I'll link to her pattern in the description if you want to check that out. I like her charts. They're easy to read, and each pattern comes with a bunch of interesting stuff. So yeah, let me get to Sleeve Island, and then I will show you how the rest works. We have arrived at Sleeve Island. The yoke is finished. I'd say this is not bad for my first attempt at Fair Isle. And I learned how to do German short rows for this as well. I added the short row shaping to the bottom of the yoke instead of the top. You can see it more on the back. I seriously messed up the math for this. I somehow managed to forget that I have 2 arms instead of 1, but I also got a larger gauge than I was expecting, and I forgot about some of the underarm extra that I'll be adding. So I think it evens out in the end, and this sweater will be wearable. It's not quite what I intended it to be, but it'll still be salvageable. That's what I get for winging it and doing my own thing instead of following an existing pattern. This is why I like to draft my patterns in code, because it's easier to work with abstractions than it is actual numbers. I have a degree in math, but I've never been able to do like basic addition and subtraction. I don't know what it is. At this point, if you were knitting by hand, you would split off the sleeves from the body and start knitting down. But instead, I did a provisional cast off in contrasting yarn. This is purl 2 together through the front loop. I like it because it leaves the last line of loops very visible and accessible, and we'll need that for later. Because this is acrylic, I'm just going to throw it in the wash, but not quite yet. There's a little bit more to this process. The next step is to find the right settings on my knitting machine to match the gauge that I got on the yoke. I won't know the final gauge of the yoke until it's blocked, and I won't know the final gauge of my swatches until they're blocked. So I'm just going to knit a few swatches at different tensions, and we'll check it all at the end after everything's been blocked. While working on that, let's talk about machine knit gauges. Machine knit stitches tend to be shorter than hand knit stitches. We're not going to bother to try to match the number of rows per inch, only the number of stitches per inch, and then we can go from there. If you're working from a pattern, just ditch the rest of it. It's not going to be right anymore because your stitches are going to be shorter, so you need to redo the math for the length of the sleeves and the length of the body. All right, I'm gonna go knit a bunch of swatches on my machine and then throw everything in the wash and come back when it's done. Here's the yoke, washed and blocked, and now I need to try it on and do some measuring to figure out how long the sleeves need to be and how long the body needs to be. So the back is here. Oh, there are no arms on this. I need to line up where the underarms are going to be and make sure the back is in the right place. Okay. About how the yoke is going to fit on the final sweater. And then I just need to measure down from where it hits on my arm to my wrist. And let's call that about 18 inches. And then I'm going to measure down from the center front to where I want it to hit at my waist. And we'll call that 10 inches. All right, time to do some math. All right, let's do some math. So we decided that the sleeves are going to be 18 inches long and the body is going to be 10 inches. So we will just remember that. And let's look at how the sleeve is going to be constructed. So we're going to pick up all of the sleeve stitches and then knit an increase for the underarm. And then we're going to cast on a few stitches for the underarm shelf. And then we will knit down to the wrist and then add 2 inches of ribbing. So this whole distance here needs to be 18 inches. And then this distance here is going to be 2 inches. And then the shelf will be 1 inch. And this increase will be 1 inch. So we just need to do the rest of the math to figure out how big this trapezoid is. All right, let's get some gauge information from our swatches and our yoke. So we don't care about the number of rows per inch. We only care about the number of stitches per inch because the gauge for hand knitting is going to be different than the gauge for machine knitting. Machine knit stitches tend to be shorter than hand knit stitches, and we'll be working with the number of rows per inch from the machine knit swatch and not from the hand knit. Okay, and you can't see any of this because I chose black. It's seasonally appropriate, but doesn't show up well on camera. 8. So we have 4 stitches per inch on the yoke, which we can work with. So let's look at our gauge swatches and see who got us closest. This one is going to be the tension. I put eyelets in this so I can remember which tension it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So at T7 we're going to have 1, 2, 3. It's going to be 4.5 stitches per inch. So that is too small, so we're not doing tension 7. 5, 6, 7, 8. It's a slightly looser stitch. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. So T8, we have 4.75 stitches per inch, which is still not quite right. So then this one is at tension 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So tension 9. What do we got? This is not 4.75, this is 4.25. I just cannot do basic math. Okay, so tension 9 is the tension that we're going to go with, so we need to get the number of stitches, the number of rows per inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Half of 11 is 5.5 rows per inch. So this is the math that we are gonna do. Okay, so see how many sleeve stitches we've got. And I portioned these off before I cast off. I used a purl 2 together bind off for this provisional bind off, so it leaves all of the stitches nice and visible. So let's just count them. So we have 44 stitches that we're going to pick up, and then we are going to increase 1 stitch on each side for 4 stitches. So that's going to be, for the underarm, we're increasing 4 times on each side. So that's going to give us math. If there are 5.5 rows per inch, I can't math. Let's work backwards on this. Okay, so we need 2 inches of cuff. So that means this is going to be 11 rows. Oh wait, no, let's take a step back. Okay, the sleeve is going to be 18 inches long. That means 99 stitches total. Sorry, rows. So the whole sleeve is going to be 99 rows total. I can do this. I can do this. All right, so we are going to knit 4 rows, increasing 1 on each side, each row. And then we are going to cast on 4 stitches each side. And that takes up 2 rows because you go to one side, cast on 4 stitches, go to the other side, cast on another 4 stitches, and that's 2 rows. And then we are going to knit all the way down minus the bottom 11 rows. But first, let's figure out the wrist circumference. I know that the ribbing is going to pull in a bit, so let's call this, I want it to fit over my hand, so let's call this, let's call it 9 inches. 9 times 4, 36 stitches. So this distance here after we've cast on everybody is going to be 44 stitches. 44 stitches plus the 4 on each side that we increased, and then the 4 on each side that we cast on. So we are at 60 stitches here. And then the total is 99 rows, minus the 4 rows that we knit at the top for the increases, minus the 2 for the cast on, and then minus the 11 for the cuff. So we have this distance here is going to be 82 rows. So in 82 rows, we need to go from 60 stitches down to 36 stitches. It's a basic trapezoid. We're going to decrease evenly. So let's go 60 minus 36. We need to do 24 decreases. We're going to do these evenly, so I'll divide that by 2. 12 decreases over the course of 82 rows. So we have 82 over 12. So about every 6 rows. So let's say knit 82 rows. Decrease every 12 to 36 stitches on each side. Wait, this isn't right. My calculator said 6 rows. I wrote down 12. This is why I should not be allowed to work with actual numbers. I didn't catch this until I had most of the sleeve knit. Learn from my mistakes. There we go. That's our sleeve pattern. So we are going to pick up all of the stitches, increase for 4 rows, 1 on each side, cast on 4 stitches on each side, and then knit 82 rows, decreasing 1 stitch each side every 12 rows until 36 stitches, and then knit 11 rows of ribbing. And then we have a sleeve. And the body is very similar, where we have increases, shelf, but then we just knit straight down. And then ribbing on the bottom. So we already know this is 11 rows. The whole thing is going to be 10 inches. 10 times 5.5 is 55. So we're going to pick up the body stitches. Increase each side for 4 rows. Cast on 4 stitches each side. So that is 55 minus 4 minus 2 for the sides, and then minus the 11 for the cuff. So that's going to be, I'm just going to knit 38 rows, and then knit 11 rows of ribbing. Okay, there's my pattern. And the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do 1 sleeve and then double check that it fits and it looks right, and then I'll knit the rest. All right, let's go knit. For the sleeve, I'm going to pick up all the stitches from the yoke. And I forgot that I needed to have the wrong side facing me, but I did eventually figure it out. This is an easy fix before you start knitting. Let's try that again. This is my LK150 mid-gauge knitting machine. It's a great starter machine. Check out the unboxing video that I did a while back. There's a link in the description. Then hang some weight. Figuring out how much you need is a lot of trial and error. And now we can knit. I'm increasing 1 stitch each side for the next 4 rows. I'm picking up the purl bump from the adjacent needle to fill the empty one. After the increases, it's time to bind on more stitches for the underarm shelf. I'm pulling out the needles and doing an E-wrap cast on. This needs to be pretty loose. Shove a claw weight in there. And the same thing on the other side, only it's easier because I have muscle memory for E-wrapping in this direction. And then it's just knitting and decreasing until the cuff. When I get to the cuff, I'm going to add in some ravel cord. This helps mark where the cuff starts and is easy to remove later. I'm going to let the rest of it just dangle for now. There, we can easily see where the cuff starts. This machine doesn't have a ribber, so I'm going to reform some of the purl stitches into knit stitches. I'm inserting the latch hook into the last stitch of the cuff and then dropping the top stitch off the needle. I ladder down and unravel all of the stitches, then start latching them back up in the other direction. And you can't see any of this because it's black and a bad angle. Let me see if I can get a better one. Here's another column in the middle of the cuff. Ladder down. Latch back up. This goes pretty quickly when you get the hang of it. And the stitch goes back on the needle. I'm leaving a long tail for a stretchy bind off. And then taking the whole sleeve off on waist yarn. There's one sleeve with the cuff ribbing.
and the ravel cord comes right out. I need to try this on to make sure that the math is mostly right. Looks like the bicep is going to fit right. And the sleeve length looks good. I'm using a sewn bind off here. And then removing the waist yarn. Here's the finished product. It's a little janky. I don't really have the hang of this yet. Second sleeve goes the same way. The body is pretty similar, except I'm overlapping one stitch with the sleeves. That will make the underarm seem a little neater. More weight this time because it's a bigger piece. Increase one stitch each side for 4 rows. Cast on for the shelf stitches. And then knit straight down to the ribbing. I'm adding ravel cord again. This time it's a little tangled, so it's not feeding nicely through the machine. Then the cuff stitches. I will admit, it's easier to work with a ribber, but reformed ribbing like this is not a bad way to go if you don't have one. Inserting the hook into the bottom stitch keeps the whole column from unraveling. I'm leaving a long tail for the sewn bind off. And then the whole thing comes off on waste yarn. And there's the body panel. By this point, I've figured out the right way to do the sewn bind off. It's like a Kitchener stitch. I'm binding off the knit stitches below the waist yarn and the purl stitches above the waist yarn. You'll need to do this a few hundred times before you get the hang of it. That looks pretty good. That's the length I want. And the back panel is going to be exactly the same. I decided that I'm unhappy with the bind off on this cuff, so I'm going to unravel it and put in a lifeline so I can redo it. This is a slow process, going one stitch at a time. And then I can go back in and do this the right way. That looks much better. Then it's just a mattress stitch for the sleeve and side seams. Here it is, mostly assembled. Just missing the underarm seam. I like to sew these from the outside in. There's the finished seam. Now I can pull out the provisional bind off. It should just unravel, but I split the yarn in a few places when I was picking up stitches. I left the provisional bind off until the end in case I was unhappy with any of the sleeve or body panels. It's much easier to unravel a sleeve or a body panel if I know that the yoke is still secure. Look at that seamless transition between hand and machine knitting. Here's the final sweater, washed and blocked. You can't even tell the difference between the hand knit stitches and the machine knit stitches. This is not bad for my first attempt at hand color work. This only worked because I chose a yarn that was compatible with my knitting machine, If you're looking for a knitting machine to do this kind of thing, you'll want to look for one that works with the kind of yarn that you usually use. So if you're making fingering weight sweaters, you want a standard gauge machine. If you're making bulky sweaters, you want a bulky gauge machine. Hybrid sweaters are a good option if you want to make cool and interesting sweaters, but you don't want to drop the extra money for a punch card or an electronic machine. If you're thinking about buying a knitting machine to do something like this, check out my buying guide video linked here. Have you ever made a sweater like this? Let me know about it in the comments. That's it. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting.